Currently, Russian logistics in the south of Ukraine is undergoing a shift that should not be underestimated. Since mid-May, Ukrainian medium-range drones have been systematically attacking the most important Russian supply route in the occupied territories in southern Ukraine. According to estimates, about 70% of Russian supplies for the southern front are transported via these road connections. Along the route, there are several important logistics centers that are supplied via Rostov-on-Don. From here, troops throughout southern Ukraine and partly in Crimea are supplied with ammunition, fuel, and essential equipment. The route starts here in the east at Rostov, goes through Taganrog, through Mariupol, a very important hub, to Berdyansk, an important port, then on to Melitopol, also a very important hub, and then along the yellow route, here towards Crimea, which is supplied via two routes. Once via this route, and once via the Kerch bridge, which will be a special focus of today's video. Currently, the drone campaign is really gaining momentum. The Ukrainians are attacking all targets here, along this red road from Mariupol to the north, along the road between Melitopol and Mariupol, and along the road from Melitopol heading north, here along the dashed line. These are the routes that are under heavy attack. We are seeing vehicle losses of nearly 300 units per day here. On the two yellow routes here between Mariupol and Taganrog, and from Melitopol towards Crimea, vehicles are also attacked every day, but the hits here are not as high as in this important area. Meanwhile, there are also new recordings every day of destroyed trucks, burned out fuel trains, and damaged supply vehicles. The road is no longer controlled by Russian soldiers, but by Ukrainian drones, which can sometimes reach targets over 100 kilometers behind the front. Russian drivers are already trying to avoid them. The problem is that the alternative routes are longer, less developed, and significantly slower. Traffic jams, detours, and delays are occurring. For the soldiers at the front, this mainly means one thing: supplies arrive later or not at all. That's exactly why the Kerch Bridge becomes interesting again. The Kerch Bridge is this bridge here, which connects Crimea and Russia. In recent years, it had lost some of its strategic importance. Russia established a functioning land connection through the occupied territories and significantly expanded rail traffic with a new supply route. So Crimea was no longer solely dependent on a bridge that, until then, was the only connection to the Russian mainland by rail. But now, things are changing as the land route is becoming more dangerous. Anyone who wants to transport supplies by land has to travel through areas that are constantly monitored by Ukrainian drones. The Kerch Bridge, on the other hand, is one of the few connections that are far enough from the front to significantly reduce the risk. If the Kerch Bridge is out of action, only that one route is left, and it's currently being destroyed by Ukrainian drones. There are hardly any other alternatives left. The railway ferries, which were supposed to take over part of the traffic after the first attack on the bridge at the beginning of the invasion, were gradually destroyed or sunk. Of the original 3 ferries, not a single one is currently operational, not because the Russians couldn't maintain them, but because the Ukrainians kept attacking them. Russia is talking about building a replacement, but even Russian sources don't expect it before the end of the year at the earliest. The ports are also coming under pressure now. This refers to the ports up here near Berdyansk, Mariupol, and the other regions here in the south of the occupied Ukraine. Just a few days ago, Ukraine itself reported attacks on 5 cargo ships in the area of Mariupol and Berdyansk. Even sea logistics are increasingly being targeted. No ship is safe anymore. At the same time, Russian air defenses in Crimea have been systematically weakened over the years. First by special forces who landed with small landing boats and then used their FPV drones to destroy important systems. Later, after the first air defense installation was destroyed, cruise missiles, ATACMS, and long-range drones were added, causing damage and destruction to the headquarters on the island. Many radar sites, command systems, early warning systems, and air defense positions have been destroyed in recent months, with some not even replaced. Crimea is much more vulnerable today than it was 2 years ago, and it was exactly this situation that Lensky took advantage of and published an open letter to Putin. In it, he proposes direct negotiations and a ceasefire. What's remarkable is the timing. Just a few days earlier, Ukraine had once again demonstrated that they are capable of striking targets deep inside Russian territory. Among other things, a corvette in a dry dock near St. Petersburg during the Economic Forum and in front of representatives from numerous countries, where Putin and the Kremlin actually wanted to demonstrate security and a strong Russia. So Lensky's message is clear. We can hit you, but we are still offering you the opportunity to back down and end this war through talks. Why make something like this public? Because this letter is not only addressed directly to Putin, it is also aimed at the global public. Ukraine wants to show that they are not interested in an endless war, but in negotiations. If Russia refuses, it's on them. It will be much harder later to shift the responsibility for continuing the war onto Kiev. You can also understand the letter as a kind of last offer before the next major operation takes place. And by that, I mean an operation within a larger undertaking. Because just a few days ago, Ukraine announced that they will now begin to significantly disrupt Russian logistics. A short time later, the Ukrainians blew up an important bridge to Crimea with the help of drones. I'll show you where it is. This is the bridge right here at this spot. This one here was attacked and destroyed by drones today. You can see videos and pictures of it on the screen right now. What does this mean for Russian logistics? That means Crimea can now be supplied even less effectively. Because now, the traffic doesn't have to go along this route anymore, but instead goes a bit further north here, and then west towards the headquarters of the 49th Army. And from there, over the only other connection here, right here at this point towards Crimea. There is no bridge here that the Ukrainians could blow up, but in the end, this definitely means a delay in supplies to Crimea and a small bottleneck that now needs to be controlled. If the Ukrainians manage to block this access as well, or perhaps disrupt it with drones so that normal traffic is no longer possible here, then Crimea will only depend on the Kerch Bridge and the Kerch Bridge itself. It is shut down whenever there's a potential attack. As we saw recently in the situation report, trucks are already piling up here because they are waiting for a crossing that is rarely available. And since the attack shortly after the invasion began, the bridge has not been able to handle the same capacity of vehicles and trains as it could before. And that makes it incredibly interesting again. Because if Ukraine actually decides to attack this bridge again, Crimea would practically be cut off from all supplies, and also part of southern Ukraine as well. But you immediately wonder, what could they even use to attack the bridge? Well, the Taurus would of course be a candidate. Unlike many other cruise missiles, it can penetrate deep into structures and theoretically also attack the supporting structures of the bridge. It basically breaks through the roadway and detonates at the bridge's support pillars, which give it stability and also represent its greatest weakness. From the intercepted conversations of German Bundeswehr officers at the time, which led to the WebEx scandal, we even know that such scenarios have already been analyzed and are theoretically also technically possible.
I'd like to quickly add something about the bridge because we've looked at it closely, and unfortunately, due to its size, the bridge is like an airfield. That means I might need 10 or 20 missiles for it. Yeah, that's a full day's work.
Where it opens if he takes out the pylons. The only problem is that nobody knows whether Ukraine has actually received Taurus cruise missiles. Friedrich Merz had already announced the delivery and promised it in case of an election victory. Since he took office, however, German arms deliveries have been published much less transparently, in fact, not at all anymore. So we don't know whether they were delivered or not, or whether they are being planned or not. Theoretically, it's possible, but the only way to prove it is through a current deployment, because then we can actually see that the Ukrainians have this weapon. Training soldiers and pilots during this time would have been possible if they had also been delivered. Why do I say would have? Well, as we know, many promises made by our current chancellor were never kept. The same thing could have happened again, especially with such an important topic as the Taurus. So a homegrown solution seems realistic. For example, the Ukrainian FP-5 Flamingo. With a warhead of about 1 ton, this cruise missile can cause significant damage. However, it has significant disadvantages compared to the Taurus. It's slower, easier to detect, easier to shoot down, and much less precise. Theoretically, it can miss a target by almost 25 meters. And that's exactly why Ukraine would probably have to rely on quantity. The bridge is about 14 meters wide, so a 25-meter margin of error is quite a lot. So drones could keep the Russian air defense busy while several flamingos approach the bridge at the same time. The chance that all will be intercepted or all will miss drops with each additional weapon approaching. Such an attack would therefore be complex and would have to be carried out with very tight coordination. But it would by no means be impossible, especially with weakened air defenses towards Crimea. The use of the new FP-7 and FP-9 ballistic missiles, also from Firepoint, would be just as realistic. Ukraine has been developing these missiles for several months now, and Firepoint itself showed us the test flight of the FP-7 just a few weeks ago. At the same time, they announced that these satellites would be used for the first attacks on Russian infrastructure or targets in occupied Ukraine and Russia. These ballistic missiles are much harder to detect and intercept than the Flamingo. They might also be much more precise than that one and could manage to significantly damage the bridge. That would be another possibility. The last possibility that comes to my mind would, of course, be a long-planned act of sabotage. We know that Ukraine is very, very good when it comes to major strikes. Just think back to Ukraine. Operation Spiderweb about a year ago, when Ukraine managed to attack a large part of the strategic bomber fleet within just a few hours, using drones that they had hidden in containers in Russia. The entire plan took a year and a half. Soon after the attack, we saw a detonation, unexpectedly, at a Kerch bridge pillar. Here, Ukrainian divers, or an underwater drone, it's still not entirely clear, were able to remotely detonate an explosive charge, which was located right at the Kerch bridge. Since then, a lot of time has passed, and it's quite possible, especially since the Kerch bridge has lost importance recently, that the Ukrainians took this opportunity and attached more explosive charges along the bridge piers, which are now waiting to be detonated. So we can see there are many ways to attack the bridge and now also good reasons to do so. Let's take a quick look at all of this summarized on the map. Here, the Ukrainians are increasing the pressure. That means these roads are not being used much. We have suffered heavy losses, and every vehicle that goes in there has to expect that it could be attacked and destroyed, and that over a large area. At the same time, we are also seeing attacks in Crimea. We are seeing attacks on trains. We are seeing attacks on ships here in this region. That means the Ukrainians are pushing Russian logistics further and further south. And now they have destroyed a bridge here, which means the detour is much longer, and the Kerch bridge is the only road that can still be used normally. And if that one is attacked as well, then there would really be absolute chaos here. That means they would have good reasons to attack. And even if not, even a normal attack without destroying the bridge would already cause major delays, since the Russians usually keep them closed for a long time after. That means it's increasingly likely, and I think we'll see something similar in the next few days, or if not, in the next few weeks. I think there are still some attacks on logistics targets that are important to make the Kerch Bridge an even more attractive target or to increase dependence on it even further. And then there will very likely be an attack in this region, and that would be quite interesting to watch. Follow the channel so you don't miss anything. Thanks to all subscribers, channel members, and the Algo crew, especially Lieutenant Colonel Renica, Sela Dittrich, and Freddie Mehrhofer. Subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next video.